Hello everyone, I'm Red Team Beaver and welcome back to day 18 of the Advent of Cyber 3 by TryHackMe's. Today's challenge, as you'll see, there is no theory aspects because the theory is also the practice. So what we'll be doing today is basically playing around with Docker, and we're going to build on top of our previous knowledge of yesterday with Amazon AWS, because we'll be using AWS to use our Docker image. But this is more about Docker than AWS, to be honest, but still, we'll be building on top of that. So what we need to do today is basically answer the following questions. Just let me scroll down. And these questions will basically be answered as we follow the theory aspects of this room. So let's dive right into it. So first off, we need to find what command will list container images stored in our local container registry. So how does it all work? Well, first off, we need to install Docker. So what is Docker? Well, basically Docker containers are a virtualization mechanism similar to virtual machines, and they can be hosted, for example, in the cloud, which is what we'll be doing today. So how does this work? Well, it basically allows you to have an infrastructure built into the cloud and that you can deploy more easily whenever needed. And that's a very strong tool to use. And one of the good example on how to use Docker for theory aspects and not a real life aspect necessarily, but is Juice Shop, which is a OWASP, like it helps you practice OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. And the best way to build it, in my opinion, is using a Docker image. So let's dive right into it. So what we need to do is we can list images available on our machine by using Docker images. However, by default, Docker is not installed. So let's install it and use the first option. Provide your password. And now we can press yes. So let's wait for it to install. And basically, this will allow us to interact with Docker images. Just press yes twice so so it can all be updated without you having to manually say yes, you can restart, yes, you can restart. And while this is loading, make sure to drink some coffee because coffee is life. All right, so while this is running, basically what this will do is it will allow us to see whatever we have available on our machine. Then from these images, we can boot them up basically. And this is what we're going to do. So don't worry too much. We're basically just following along. So now that Docker is installed, we can do Docker images and we need to do sudo. And without any surprise, we don't have any images yet. So what can we do? Well, let's keep going. So what we can do is whenever we have a URL that will lead to a Docker image, we can actually pull it using this command right here. So just do this and it's basically gonna pull the latest Grinch-AoC Docker container. And don't forget to do sudo. As you can see, our output is the same basically as the one being shown on the theory part. Drink some water, drink some coffee. All right. Now we can actually list it by doing sudo docker images. And as you can see, now we do have an image right here. So what can we do? Well, we can spin it. And when I say spin it, I mean run it. And don't forget sudo. And once that's gonna run, as you can see now, I can start interacting with this Docker, kind of like a virtual machine, as we said previously. So as we can see, I am a new user, and if I were to do ls-la, I would see whatever is inside my my home folder, basically. So we have the same thing here. So what we can do now is we can use this printf to see whatever is going on here. And we see that there's an API key that could be interesting. We have some host names. We have some stuff, right? So the API key, of course, we don't usually want to leave that behind. So that's very interesting to us. All right. So let's go back and try to answer some questions. So what command will list container images stored in your local container registry? Well, it's Docker images, right? So now we haven't done this yet. So let's just go back up and keep working through the quote unquote bonus challenge. So let's work through it together. All right. So we found the API key that wasn't meant to be left behind. So that's always good. And now basically a container image is composed of a number of layers. And in these layers, there could be sensitive info that could be found. And basically, if you don't clean it up, it's kind of like a VM, right? If you leave your password.txt file on your VM's desktop, well, it's still going to be there whenever you export it, right? Kind of like the same thing is happening here, albeit a little bit more complex. So what can we do? Well, let's see how we can save our Docker file as a tar file, and that tar file can then be extracted afterwards. So let's just copy all of this and let's actually exit from this. We don't need it. So let's make the AoC and then cd to AoC, right? So next we can just paste this command. So docker save -o will be for the output. So we're basically saving this. Oops, I did not mean to do that. We're basically saving this image that we have into the output of aoc.tar. Then we can actually extract this aoc.tar. We need to do sudo as always. So now, as you can see, we have aoc.tar that's now existing. However, if you are not root on your system, you'll need to do sudo to do basically everything whenever we extract this. So let's make our life easier and only do sudo once. So let's do sudo shown, and shown will basically change the ownership of the file and call it your username, and your group typing is ard, and then provide the file. So what this is doing basically is it's going to change the ownership to, first the username will become RedTeamBeaver, so the user that will own it will be RedTeamBeaver, and then the group that owns it will be whatever you put after the colon. Then you provide the file. And of course do this with sudo. So now if we do ls-l, you see that I am the owner of this file, and now I can interact with it without having to use sudo every time. So now we can extract it by using this command. And you'll see that now we have stuff. So let's put the terminal a little bit bigger so we don't have so much noise. And now we see that we have basically ashes here, and we have a JSON here, JSON file and manifest file. So what is all of this? Well, once this is extracted, these files represent the various container images layer. So now we'll need to investigate these layers. So the layers are all of the directories out there. And basically, manifest.json represents the manifest or container image layers that compose a final container image. So what is all of this? Well, if we're to cat out manifest.json, we'll see that it's very ugly. So what we can do is actually do this step right here and install JQ. So let's do sudo and then install JQ. So once this is installed, we could actually just press enter here. So once this is installed, we can actually just cat it out and then pipe it into JQ. And you'll see it's very much prettier. So now we see all of our layers. We see our repo tags and our config.json file. So this first JSON file that has a hash is our config file. Let's put it a bit bigger again. So if I were to cat it out, you'll see again, this is ugly. So once more, we just need to pipe it into JQ. So this is our, like basically our config file. So how was it created? What is it running, etc. So let's scroll down a bit. All right. So the configuration file, the root of the unpacked container directory image, yes, this is right here, can be inspected using the same thing. So the first section of the manifest configuration files will walk us through the final image configuration. Yes, that's good. But as we can see, the empty layers are true. What does this mean? Well, if the empty layers are true, we can see more stuff as far as I know. And it's actually more described here. So let's read it together. So basically, if we were to go back here, we can actually find that it's like basically, so this is like the commands that are being run, right? So if this is being run, then we know that at some point this is cloning this fconsole tool. So what they're saying here is if we are reviewing this, we'll see that it's a tool that launches or subprocesses with environment variables using data from this, basically, right? So this is just a tool. So what does this mean? Well, since it is a tool that launches subprocesses with environment variables, then our API key is actually doing something quite interesting for us, right? Because it means that we may be able to see stuff we shouldn't be seeing, right? So what does this mean? Well, this means that we can actually inspect each and every layers one by one, and we can look at whatever is inside, and one of them actually does contain this. So let's look at it. So and try to find it actually. So what is contained inside a layer? So for example, let's grab 213, right? So let's do ls-l a213. As you can see, there's layer.tar. So once more, if we could cd to 21, and we could do tar dash xvf, and then the layer.tar. And if we're to do ls-l again, we'll see that it actually created two new directories that are tmp and var. So let's cd actually, and let's do it with each and every one of them until we find the root, basically. So once more, we found etc tmp user var. Now, all of this could contain sensitive data that we could use, of course. But let's save some time, and since we know that we need to look for console, sorry, let's look at it. So on the third one, so the 2c06, we actually did find the root folder. So let's cd to root, and we could do ls-l, and we find that it's only contained this thing. So what's inside? Well, it's a config file. So if we're to look at this config file, cat config, it's actually not ugly. And what we could do is actually look for a token, as we're saying here. So let's answer the questions. Actually, let's complete the last question. So it's just straightforward, and then we can answer the other one. So what we could do is actually use this, pipe it into grep-i, and use token as a string. And we see that token was actually found right here, right? So this token is our final answer. So what command will allow us to save a Docker image as a tar archive? Well, if we scroll back up a bit, just before we outputted like our thing in that we could extract it, well, we saw it right here. So it's Docker save, and then you provide the URL, and then you save it, right? Oh, well, not necessarily the URL, but just your image name, basically, and then you save it with the output. So it's Docker save. So Docker save. What is the name of the file, including file extension, for the configuration, repository tags, and layer hash values stored in the container image? So if we're to cd back to AoC, right? We do ls-l, you remember manifest, right? We actually read it. So if we do manifest into JQ, we see that this is it mentions the config file, repo tags, and different layers. So our answer here for config, repo tags, and layers is manifest.json. So just like that, guys, I know this was a very brief overlook. I am not the best one at explaining Docker, and actually this room taught me something. I didn't know about all of the options that we could have. I didn't know that we could save into it tar file, and then we could basically visit this archive. Well, this Docker container as an archive, which is very cool, and I guess it's useful in some contexts. I don't have an idea on top of my head, but I am not a pro in Docker. So somebody more experienced than me could actually probably explain it to you. So I hope you learned something at least. And basically remember that these challenges aren't meant to make you an expert in any kind of subjects. They're just meant to basically give you enough of the basics so that you can go out and look for yourself more information. All of this that we've done so far, you don't need to be an expert in, but if it piques your curiosity, you should dive more into it. So always remember that there's more to learn, and all of this could be a whole professional path for you probably. It's like DevOps, for example. You have teams that are dedicated to DevOps in enterprises and organizations. So don't feel bad if you are not an expert in all of these. They are just meant to basically give you a first glance at the subject, and then you can whenever you encounter it in a professional context, you're like, oh yeah, I remember I saw that once. So with that in mind, let's go to the outro. Thank you guys so much for watching day 18 of the Advent of Cyber 3 by TryHackMe. If you liked the video, make sure to subscribe, and if you want to support me, the links are in the description below. As always, it was a fun day and I can't wait for tomorrow. And on this note, let's say goodbye and see you tomorrow for day 19 of the Advent of Cyber 3 by TryHackMe.